Hey, it's Alex Radcliffe from BoardGameCo, and today we are covering Veiled Fate, a game by a film and animation studios company that is at $300,000 raised, crushing their $100,000 goal, 3,000 backers, 15 days to go, and we're not even a full day yet. We're barely half a day, and this is absolutely insane. Why is this level of support for, like I said, a game from a film and animation studio, a game that is fairly expensive considering the components you're getting, and yet the support is crushing it? Why do people seem to love this company? Why are people jumping on board? What are we missing, or maybe not missing, because I'm going to get into all of that. And what's going on? How do you play this game? What's the game about? What is Veiled Fate? Is it a game for you? Should you back it? All those questions and more will answer. And of course, timestamps down below so you can jump to whatever section you want. So let's start with the game itself. What is Veiled Fate? Veiled Fate is, to coin the term they use, it's a strategic deduction game. Now, this is not the first game of its kind, but nonetheless similar to, I guess, the Save the Brothers and the MDS system, which was also not the first system of its kind. They're still applying a name and a label, which is great because names and labels are great. We have, deck building, we have strategy games, we have Ameritrash, we have hybrid games, and so now we have strategic deduction, which is a label that makes sense. And what does that label mean? It means that this is going to be a game that has an element of deduction, similar to games like One Night Ultimate Werewolf, like Resistance, like Secret Hitler, like all those games, but it's more about the strategy. The deduction is part of the game, but not core to the game. You take deduction out of One Night Ultimate Werewolf, and you don't have a game. It's not a game without deduction. But this is a game. This is still a strategy game in which deduction will help you win. Perhaps it's not essential to win, but it will certainly give you a leg up. It is one of many tools in your toolbox as you attempt to win this game. And this is going to be a game that's very similar. Before we get into how this one plays, this is a game that's very similar to Clans, a game by Leo Colovini that is an excellent game. Despite the rating of 6.6, I actually really like this game. I had it in my collection for years. I eventually got rid of it because it wasn't hitting the table anymore, but it's a game I thoroughly enjoyed, and it's a game that is very much strategic deduction. I have no idea if IV Studios, I don't even know if it's pronounced IV Studios or 4 Studios, I don't know, but I have no idea if they've actually played Clans, but I do recommend giving it a shot if you haven't, because Clans is an excellent game that is going to have similarities to Veiled Fate, in the sense that in Clans, you had a goal, and that goal was making your village the best, the most powerful, to have the most points in the game. But similar to Veiled Fate, ultimately you would do better if you could convince people you are not the color that they thought you were. Or in other words, if I know that red is clearly dominating, then I'm going to try to target red. But what if red isn't even in the game? What if I'm not red? Who is red? How do we stop red? There's an element of not knowing who the players at the table are, and thus not knowing how they'll act, and thus not being able to perfectly predict what they'll do, versus if you can figure that out. If you do know that Jack across the table from you is red, then you'll be more able to anticipate his actions. You'll be able to anticipate what move he's going to make to move his villages around the board to perfectly get what he needs. And I'm focusing a lot on Clans because, well, I have experience with Clans. I love that game. I've played it a lot over the years, and it is a game that strategic deduction element is thoroughly enjoyable. It has that element of One Night Ultimate Werewolf, of Resistance. It has that element of trying to figure out what's going on at the table. And yet that's not really the game that's being played. That's just one tool to help. Basically, you're figuring out what the puzzle is that other players are playing, while also trying to hide yourself from others at the same time. It has all the elements of deduction that I love in games, while not compromising on the strategy element of the gameplay as well. And Veiled Fate is going to have a similar feel to it. Veiled Fate is a game in which you play as a god, and you are going to have a particular demigod at your, one of these demigods are going to be your kid, your whatever it is, your prodigy that you're going to be trying to champion their victory as the game progresses. And effectively what's going to happen is throughout the game, you're going to take actions. Let me see if we could find where the sequence of play is. But you're going to be taking actions that move these demigods around the table, while also playing cards to the common area to achieve your goals. So you might move the red god to a particular area and play a few cards, and suddenly everyone's wondering, well, are you trying to bump the red god up? Are you trying to take them down a notch? What are you trying to do as you sit there and move things around the board, playing cards to a common area, which as enough gods are moved, the cards will eventually be turned over and flipped, and you'll see whether the person played scorpions or feathers, adjusting the game in one direction or the other. So you don't really know what happened. Did you move the red god and play cards that benefited you? Did you move the red god and play cards that hurt someone? Who are you at the table? There is an element of trying to figure out who is actually, well, who's doing what in this game. that is something that is, if done well, it is a phenomenally interesting mechanic, phenomenally interesting in multiple senses, in the sense that it's a game that will be enticing to strategy players. It's a game that will be enticing to deduction players. It is a game in which you can simultaneously lie the whole game or never even say an untruth at all. It has all those things wrapped into a single package. And if you want to know more about the game, if you want to see more, there's any number of different things you can look into. There are playthroughs. There's a Kickstarter preview by Quackalope. There's a preview by Man vs. Meeple. We have Becca Scott did a how to play video. We have a 2-minute how to play video by Ivy Games themselves. Again, keep in mind, they are a film and animation studios company, so the quality of what they put out is going to be incredible. There's any number of degrees of content out there in terms of trying to find out more about this game. Rado has 3 videos on it, how to play, a run through, a final thought. There's a lot of stuff going on here in this game. And this is a game that supposedly plays well between 2 to 8 players. I'll admit I'm skeptical about that player count. I'll admit that I'm skeptical that it would be a game that would play well with 2 players. I'm just going off the idea that I just feel that interaction would be harder to be rewarding at smaller player counts. It might be fine. It might even be amazing. So this is just my own opining on what seems to be a very wide-ranging player count, and it is a bold claim that any game handles exceptionally well at those player counts. Handles, that's easy. Handles well is a pretty bold claim. I'm not saying they can't deliver on it. I'm just expressing the skepticism because, again, 2 to 8 is a very wide player count. Past that, let's go into the pledge levels, and then from there we'll go into the whole should you back it and all that. So the pledge levels over here, to begin with, we have $65 for Veiled Fate, the base game. This is technically the retail edition of the game, although I'll note that the retail edition of Moonrakers, their previous game, is surprisingly hard to get your hands on. So this is a game in which there is a retail edition, which normally if you watch my stuff, you know that I am incredibly dismissive of retail editions. Don't back them in the Kickstarter, they'll be cheaper later, no problem, easy peasy, done whatever. Except for Moonrakers, that's not currently the case. Moonrakers is a game that's not easy to get your hands on, and so that does change things up a bit. Next up from there, we have for $85, we have Veiled Fate with the Kickstarter exclusive minis. And so let's scroll down to the pledge levels here so you can get a quick feel for what they're showing you over here. But over here, somewhere, over here, definitely over here, we're going to keep scrolling until we find it. Here we go. So, pledge levels, like I said, the base tier for $65, the exclusive tier for $85, which gives you the base game, plus these miniatures, as well as the Kickstarter exclusive box, which is optional in case you prefer the other box, and then of course 6 Kickstarter age cards and 5 Kickstarter city cards. So it does give you some extra content, some miniatures, and a box for an additional $20. And then we have the Make It Metal pledge, which is going to be $145, an additional $60 to get all the plastic bits in metal. Which is, if you really want to deluxify your components, then that's an interesting way to go. As far as the benefits, why back now? First of all, you'll get the game first. Second of all, you will influence the Kickstarter decisions. You'll be part of the voting in the process of choosing what goes into the game. And then finally, the exclusive rewards we just mentioned. For each of those, you can determine your own valuation of how much value do you place in receiving it early, how much value do you place in being part of the voting process. I'm the one who tends to focus on the rewards, the monetary incentive to back a game now versus to back a game later. As far as the add-ons, for $20 you can get the miniatures. Obviously, if you're just getting the miniatures, you probably should just bump straight up to the Kickstarter pledge, because why would you pay $20? It's $20 more anyway, so why not get the other extra Kickstarter content as well? For $29 or $9 upgrade, if you're already at the Kickstarter exclusive, you can get a wash applied to all those miniatures. A wash, for those who don't know, is basically just a little bit of a wash applied to the miniatures that makes them stand out more. So if you look at these, you can see the difference in the shadowing. One is a plain piece of plastic, one is a piece of plastic with more contours, with more shadow, with more texture because of that wash that sinks into the recessed areas of the miniatures. If you paint miniatures, then applying a wash to 9 miniatures is not the hardest job to do and may well not be worth the $9, but to each their own on that one. And you may not even like the wash, who really knows? For $9 you can get the Veiled Fate clear sleeves, and then for $5 you can get an extra coin. So, why the hype? Why the buzz? Should you back it? Why in the world is this game at $315,000? I think it jumped already since I started this video. At $315,000 on day one with a film and animation studios company. And before we cover that, let's talk about the fact that there is a stretch goal in the game. There is a solitary stretch goal, and actually there's an optional buy we missed as well. For the stretch goal, there's a single stretch goal that they are adding that is absolutely ridiculous. Ridiculous in the sense that it is simultaneously something that's bizarre, it is bold, and it's different, and it's also Quackalope based. And this is the unstretch goal stretch goal, which basically they're saying they're not fans of stretch goals. They like to have everything together. They like to give you the full package day one. This is what it is. This is the game we want you to have. But we're still going to add a stretch goal, because people wanted to expand the lore in the game. People want to expand the world building in this game. And so how are we going to do that? We're going to put $1 million stretch goal, and if they hit that, they're going to create a compendium, and they're going to write it with Quackalope. Now, if you don't know Quackalope, Quackalope's favorite game mechanic is flavor text. That's what he likes. This is a guy who starts all his videos by flipping through a rule book trying to find the one section where someone wrote something flavor texty so he can read it on camera. He loves flavor text, and the idea of him being involved in the creation of flavor text and the creation of a world is, well, interesting. And with $315,000, probably $325,000 by the time this video is over, with that being raised in less than a day, I'm betting they're going to hit $1 million. And so who is this company? How is a film and animation studios company this popular day one? And I only know half the answer. And to half the answer, we're going to focus on Moonrakers, which was their last campaign. And Moonrakers is a game that was beautifully produced, that raised $400,000 with 6,300 backers before the campaign was over, for what is essentially an expensive, overpriced deck builder. And yet it holds its value. It's a game that does hold its value, at least so far. It's a game that if you look at the geek market, this is a game that's selling for $90. If you look at the price history as well, it is selling for $90 plus shipping and whatnot for this game. And it's a game that's currently rated an 8.7, I believe, an 8.6 on BoardGameGeek. And yet it's just a deck builder, right? So why the love? Why the support? Why are people spending so much money on these beautifully produced, seemingly good games? I mean, the question answers itself while also not answering itself. You're paying for something here that is a little bit less defined. And what I mean by that is if you look at the components of either of these games alone, they do not justify the price tag. The components alone do not justify. You're talking about 9 miniatures, a bunch of cards, and a board. This is what you're getting for $85. That doesn't look like $85 worth of content to me. It's a bigger box, but is this $85 worth? It's a hard answer. That's before we even come into shipping, because shipping is going to run you an additional $15 on the cheap end if you're in the US. And that's a lot of money for what's going on here. So let's cover the will it hold its value, should you back it, should you not? And that's a tough one, because the first baseline is, as far as what its game is worth to yourself, that is a personal determination. Are you willing to spend $100? And again, the pledge levels will vary, but are you willing to spend $100 to get this game? Is that worth it to have this game on your shelf? Versus Clans, which is, again, ignore the 6.6 rating. It's better than that. People are wrong. But I guess it's a little arrogant to say that. But I like this game more than a 6.6. It's a solid 7.5 for me. Clans is a game you can get for $28. And it's going to large degrees have that same feel. If you like the element of strategic deduction, if you want to see if it's for you, check out Clans for significantly less than $100. But this game is not Clans. Is it better than Clans? Is it worse than Clans? What element will it give that game? It's certainly more visually attractive than Clans. They are, like I said, a film and animation studios. They know what they're doing in terms of putting things out that will resonate with people, in terms of putting things out that are beautifully produced. And so a personal determination, that is up to you. As far as will it hold its value, I'm pretty sure yes. And I would not have thought that. Keep this in mind that I passed on Moonrakers. I was still backing Kickstarters when Moonrakers came out, and I was intrigued by Moonrakers. But it was an overpriced deck builder by a first-time company, and I would not have thought it would hold its value. Something I've talked about in videos before, I'm not always right. This whole channel is about finding the various common denominators of what makes a Kickstarter succeed, hold its value, or not. There's no perfect answer to anything, but if you look at enough Kickstarters over time, and like myself, if you deal with the Kickstarter used market on a regular basis, you will find those common denominators more and more. But every once in a while, something breaks the mold. And IV Games, with both Moonrakers and with Veiled Fate, they are very potentially breaking the mold. Now, the feedback we've seen on Veiled Fate so far is pretty decent. It is pretty decent, is probably the wrong word. It is pretty good. It's pretty positive. Overall, the feedback has been well received. So combine their previous Kickstarter, which held its value, combine this one, which looks beautiful, combine a mechanic which I like, strategic deduction I like, Combine a very wide player count, although that may or may not end up counting against them depending on if it actually does play well with those player counts. Combine all that and the beautiful production, the game trays insert, all this stuff over here, and you are looking at a game that will likely hold its value. Also combine limited retail release. Limited retail availability will also impact both the price of Moonrakers as well as the price of Veiled Fate. So yeah, the personal assessment for yourself, whether it'll hold its value, whether it's worth it for you, that's on you. Whether you will be able to get this game cheaper down the road, I don't believe you will. Whether you'll be able to sell this for what you pledged for it, I believe you will. In terms of that $145 Make It Metal pledge, that one's a little trickier. That's going to be most aligned with all miniature resin pledges, which you find in some Kickstarters, meaning it's the full-on deluxe. It's the deluxe of the deluxe. People finding, even though we want these minis, we want them even more miniatures. In their case, resin. In this case, metal. And so that one, generally the answer is yes, but you will still have a harder time finding someone. There's going to be a lower number of people who are willing to back that game, who are willing to buy it in the secondhand market for that Make It Metal pledge. But there likely will be people, especially if the game proves to be good as the last one, or perhaps better. And then lastly, that last optional buy I missed on, which is this beautiful wooden board. This absolutely insanely beautiful wooden board. Let's see if we can find the actual pledge over there. The actual pledge for that wooden board is over here, the premium wooden Veiled Fate board for $179. I want this board. It looks amazing. It looks incredible. It looks deluxe. It's also going to be a pain in the butt to store. Well, I mean, you're going to have to put this right next to your Crokinole board, which you should have a Crokinole board. That's true. So you should put it next to your Crokinole board, wherever you're storing that bad boy, or perhaps mount it on a wall. This thing looks like it would look beautiful on a wall. In fact, of Ivy Games, you should put a little extra $10 for a little mounting kit or something like that, where you can put this on the wall somewhere, frame it or whatnot, pull it down when you want to play the game. Basically, give people a 2-for-1. It's both a piece of art and it's part of a game. And then lastly, I mentioned that Moonrakers as well is also going to be available in the Pledge Manager. If that's something you're interested, you can check out Moonrakers. That will be available in the Pledge Manager as well. And then lastly, I'll note there is also a first 48 hours bonus, and that's a twofold bonus, although one's a little different than usual, which is if you back in the first 48 hours, there is a free pin, so that's a nice little perk. I think this type of thing tends to be a good first 48 hours perk, because it's not so big that people really mind later, but also they do feel they got something extra, so it's kind of one of those, it's a good one because it's small enough and not that big a deal. Additionally, one that I don't think I've seen before, which is they are offering a exclusive optional buy in the first 40 hours. So this is one where you're not actually getting something for free for backing, but you're getting access to potentially buying something if you back in the first 48 hours, which is something new and interesting, and I am curious how it plays out. But that's basically Veiled Fate. It is a game that baffles the mind as to why this company has built up such a loyal fan base in such a short time, in basically 2 games. I don't know how much of the audience is coming over from whatever other fan base they have, from whatever other popularity, but at the end of the day, they are putting out beautifully produced games, they are integrating with the community, they are dealing with Quackalope for flavor text, and that Quackalope guy is pretty half decent, so I'm okay with that. And that's basically Veiled Fate, an intriguing game, one that I am certainly interested in. As far as whether I'm backing it, let's cover that. I don't know yet. I am keeping an eye on this campaign. I do have an active pledge because of that early bird. I will be taking a look, and I am hoping to play it on Discord before the campaign is over. That's another thing worth mentioning. They are hosting TTS playthroughs on a regular basis, so check out their Discord channel. That way you can see if this is a game for you as well. For myself, I am incredibly interested because, like I said, Clans was a game that I really enjoyed, and at the end of the day, what made it leave my collection is while I enjoyed the strategic deduction aspect of Clans, the actual strategy section was fairly weak compared to other strategy games. And so if Veiled Fate brings strategic deduction back to my table, but does so with more strategy in the strategy side of things, then that would be a reason for me to back this game for sure. Otherwise, well, I'll have to play the game and see. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from BoardGameCo. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, have a good one.